Hello, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Speak Your Life podcast. I am your host, Really Cole, and I have such a great guest with me today. I had the privilege of reading her book that is about to be released, and I'm so excited that I get to introduce her to my audience. With me is Miss DeLisa Treshelle, and she is the author of Childhood Scars. DeLisa Treshelle is an author, inspirational speaker, manuscript delivery coach, and a prophetic artist. She is the host of Reveal to Heal podcast and scribe on the Dear Daughter blog. She resides in Dallas, Texas, where I am. Hey, girl.
Hey.
And she leads Uncovered Through Christ, a ministry dedicated to exposing and healing the hidden wounds of families, including pornography addiction, molestation, incest, abandonment, and rejection. As the owner of Leap from My Pen, a book writing company where she coaches aspiring authors to birth their promise through writing and ordained canvas, where she creates personalized prophetic art pieces, DeLisa helps others heal from the inside out. And when I tell you that this bio really is a testament to everything that you are, because reading your books and the themes that just resonate throughout, I can definitely say that is exactly what you're doing. You're helping others heal from the inside out. First thing I want you to tell the people, Delisa, is where are you originally from?
So I am originally from Shreveport, Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little country.
Okay. Well, that's all right. I'm from Montgomery, Alabama. So I'm a little country myself.
It,
Well, raised in Montgomery, Alabama, but from a small town called Fayette, Alabama.
okay.
Yeah, where we just have a Walmart. So, but I don't know if people would consider that a small town if you got a Walmart, because I know some
Yeah.
towns don't even have that. But I can say, when reading your book, the themes that really jumped out through reading is you talk about rejection, you talk
Mhm.
about loneliness, you talk about addiction,
Mhm.
you talk about incest,
Mhm.
and then you ultimately take us through healing and redemption. So
Mhm.
before we even kind of get into the meat of the book, I want to know, when you decided to write it, what did you go through spiritually as well as physically writing this book? Because reading it, it was like having an intimate conversation with a friend,
Mm.
right? Like you're really being very intimate and very vulnerable. So I know that even though we ultimately come to healing and redemption, I know the process had to be taxing.
Yes. The process. So it's funny because this is actually a relaunch of this book.
Hmm.
So I originally released this book in 2021.
Okay.
But God actually gave me this book in 2018.
Mm.
So the story with that is when I first was writing my book, I had this idea that it was just going to be this inspirational thing. I'm talking a little bit about my dad not being around and a little bit about my mom and, just full of inspiration to help people just find God. And that's
Hmm.
what I thought it was going to be. That's what I thought I signed up for. However, as I submitted to actually writing the book, God started telling me that He wanted me to talk about, being intimate with female cousins when I was younger and battling with homosexuality and all these different things. And when I first heard that, I actually rejected it. And
Mm.
so I decided to not write my book because I'm like, during that time, I had not fully gone into my healing process. I
Hmm.
was just getting to know God. And so imagine just getting to know God and He's telling you that you have to step out and do something that big. And
Girl,
it
not only
was
step out,
crazy.
like tell all your business.
Like, come
It's
on.
like,
And so
God, I just
I
met
just
you.
got right. So So I was not ready. I went into a lot of rebellion because I'm like, I'm not talking about this. I went through a lot of just crushing and pruning to even allow God to help me write the book, to be honest. Because once I heard that, I did not want to put that out. I didn't want, hidden things in my family to be brought about. Now, mind you, at this time, he is revealing to me my ministry, my purpose. And so it all makes sense now. But at the time, I still was operating in a lot of fear, a lot of rejection. I didn't want people to look at me crazy. I didn't have boldness back then. And so I just was so against writing the book the way he wanted me to write it. And so anytime I would start back writing a book, I tried to take out the stuff that he wanted me to write about. I'm like, this just going to be inspirational. Like, this is how you get to know God, and that
Right,
was going to be
right.
that. So it was just a lot. I ended up getting into a relationship that I wasn't supposed to be in. Everything that I did was running away from this book process. But what I've learned, it wasn't just writing the book, it was a healing and a pruning process. So
Right.
as I was writing the book, I just had to go through so much. I had to start the forgiving process with my father. I had to start having tough conversations with my mom. I had to do all of these things, and I'm thinking I'm just writing a book, and it's like I'm doing so much behind the scenes, and it's just like I wasn't just writing a book. I was living out a lot of the things that I'm talking about. And
Right.
so when I finally got to releasing the book in 2021, I actually got this prophecy from this lady telling me that it wasn't time to release the book. But during that time, I was so frustrated because every time I turned around, God was just pressing on me to write this book. And so I'm like, why would he be pressing it on me if it wasn't the time? And so
Right.
I took that like, I'm like, she a false prophet. Like, she don't know what she's talking about. But to be honest with you, I got other like warnings, so to speak, that it wasn't the time. And to be very honest too, one of the reasons I was trying to rush it out in 21 is because I was still trying to cover up for some of my brokenness. If I hurry
Mm.
up and come from behind the scenes, then people will accept me. I get to walk in my purpose and do all of this stuff, but that's not how God wanted to do it. And
Right.
so unfortunately, when I put the book out, because my heart wasn't really right as far as like I hadn't fully gone through the process, um I couldn't really push it the way that I know that a book is supposed to be pushed, because
Right.
the fact that I help authors and I've done so much behind the scenes with marketing books, writing books, all of that, I knew that I wasn't putting my best foot forward. It's almost like something was preventing me from fully going out with my book. I wanted to do the podcast interviews and all of the stuff that I'm doing now, but I couldn't. And so I believe that because I still needed more healing, it was really God kind of like restraining me. And so from 2021 to now, I have done so much inner healing work. I've gone through so much deliverance. I've had so much pruning. I mean, it's just crazy the processes that I've had to go through.
Right.
Um, and 2021 to now, which is 4 years. That was a very extreme process. But I started my healing journey in 2018. I just wasn't really going as deep as I had these past 4 years. So I would
Right.
say every bit of 6 years that I've been on this journey, and now I'm finally putting this book out the right way. So it has been such a process. I have had to have so many tough conversations. I've had to go and apologize to people that actually wronged me.
Right.
And I'm like, God, what's going on? Like, this person is somebody who has aided in so much of my rejection and pain since childhood, constantly talks bad about me, constantly always has a negative whatever about me because I'm different, because I have a light or whatever. And I always had some type of hidden like comments about me. And I've only tried to see the best in this person, want them to strive, and thrive and walk in their purpose, want them to know God, want them to heal. Why would you have me go and apologize to them? I've never, not
Mm.
only have I not got an apology, I've never even been told that I wronged you. So
Right.
what are you talking about? But it was me being humbled, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. And
Mm-hmm.
so this one particular person, there were times where they were going through a lot of grief, and I just wasn't there, and I could have been there because I'm the one who was starting to be on fire for God. And you're the person that people turn to in your family when they're going through a hard time. And
Right.
so I just wasn't there. They were reaching out, to talk for prayer, whatever. But I was just so focused on what God called me to do. I just wasn't present, and I just wasn't being that shoulder to lean on. And so that's what God had me apologize for. And it was so crazy to me. I'm like, you know my heart. Like, that I desire to be there. But it's crazy that you're having me apologize to this person when, compared to what they've done to me, it don't even, line up at all.
Right.
And so that was some of my process. Apologizing to people who wronged me,
Mm-hmm.
getting into therapy, going through inner healing and deliverance, having tough conversations with my mom, going through that forgiveness process. God actually restored the relationship with my father and I for 4 years before he passed in
Mm-hmm.
2023. And
And
so
you know
I
what? And we'll talk a little bit, but there's one thing that I wanted to say. This was a little quote that I took from, it was towards the beginning of your book, and you were talking about healing, and you said the
Mhm.
reality is sometimes healing hurts worse than the events themselves. That is why healing isn't a destination, but a journey that requires patience, courage, and faith. So just hearing the story of you started to write the book, you were kind of like, okay, Lord, I don't want to put all that out there. I just want to put something inspirational out there just in case someone is dealing with rejection and abandonment. How did you, what was there a catalyst, or was there an event that made you come around to doing it how God wanted you to do it?
Yeah, I think because I ended up getting into a relationship because I was running. And I didn't understand that I was running at the time. I didn't understand why I kept falling into the same patterns. And so basically I went into this relationship, I forced this relationship. I broke my celibacy. I got out of alignment with the place that I was with God, where I was getting to know him, starting my healing journey in 2018. All of that got disrupted because I started to entertain this relationship the
Mm,
following year. And so because that relationship broke me so much, I mean, the amount of grief that I went through from that relationship, thinking he was my husband,
mm,
the fact that it was a 10 plus year relationship that honestly I messed up because of my actions. This man didn't pursue me. He didn't come and ruin my life. He didn't do anything. My brokenness caused me to do, just all of these things that was not of God. And so because of that breaking and that relationship finally ending, I went through so much heartbreak. Like the type of heartbreak and grief I experienced from that relationship ending was worse than people that I have lost, like people that have passed away. It was just that extreme. I mean, to the point where some days I was having anxiety attacks. Um, everything in the spiritual realm was hiding because God was trying to pull me out, but the enemy was trying to get me to,
mm-hmm.
lean on familiar things. It was just so much going on at that time. And so once that process kind of was coming to its end, I'll say 2023-ish is when I
Okay.
I finally kind of, because I had gone through healing from that relationship, ended in 2020. So for 3 years, I was just heavy in allowing my heart to break and allowing myself to feel the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think early 2023 is when I finally, it's almost like I had this awakening of like, all of these years, all of this running, all of these things that I tried to do, it just never panned out the way that I had in my mind. I really need to be obedient to God and what he told me to do.
Right, right. So, um, with that, I know when we had our initial phone call, I asked you about who introduced you to Christ. How was your foundation laid? And I know that your grandmother, you talk about her in your book, was very, very important in laying that foundation for you. So you're grown, right, and you're like living your own life, you're making your own decisions, and I know that you went into the armed forces. When did you decide, you know what, enough is enough? I am going to, I want to be closer to God. So
Mhm.
I'm going to start making those steps to be closer to Him. How old were you when you decided that?
So I don't know the age because
Okay.
I feel like it was a long time ago, but I can tell you the year. So it was actually
Mm-hmm.
two scenarios. So the first one was in 2013. I was in another like really bad relationship. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and still figuring out life. I was fresh out of the military. I was dealing with mental health issues and a physical disability that I had gotten from the military. And so this guy came along, just appearing to be everything that I had prayed for, but at
Mm-hmm.
the time I was not fully aware of what God wanted me to do, even as it relates to my body. Like, so at that
Mm-hmm.
time I wasn't celibate, anything like that. I just knew that I wanted to be married. And so this guy basically just came along with a lot of manipulation, and I fell into it. So basically what happened was, because he pursued me and then he tried to back away, I ended up doing a lot of things in that relationship that were really unlike me, because I
Mm-hmm.
was operating a lot out of my flesh, because I felt like I was fresh out of the military. I had my whole life ahead of me. You could have left me alone. And so I went
Right.
through so much in that relationship. And there was this one moment in 2013 where it was the health conditions I was dealing with. I had previously had a failed surgery. I was still trying to figure out life as a college student, dealing with mental health and anxiety. And then I'm in this bad relationship where I'm fighting every other day, physically, jumping on this man. He's hitting me. He's
Mm.
cheating, bringing me back diseases. I mean, just all types of stuff going on. And I got to this point where I wanted to commit suicide. And
Mm.
so at the time, because I was dealing with so much rejection and abandonment issues that I wasn't aware of, I just latched on to this man. It was almost like, you can't break up with me. It was
Right.
that strong. And so he kept trying to end the relationship, and I kept going back to, you could have just left me alone. Like, now I'm out here in a whole nother city, whatever. And so honestly, I told him I was gonna kill myself, really for attention, to be
Mm.
honest, because it was such a stronghold. Now, mind you, this is stuff going on in the spiritual realm that I'm unaware of. It was such a stronghold, and I'm like, this man just cannot leave me. And so to get his attention, I'm like, I'm gonna kill myself. I remember taking some pills that were actually that I actually bought to help with my a health condition, which is crazy how stuff works. And I took those pills, I poured them in my hand, and I sent him a picture like, hey, I'm about to kill myself, da 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 da. But here's the thing. I went into it to get attention from him, but then the real feelings of wanting to take my life actually came upon me.
Wow.
And I actually wanted to take my life, because in that moment, I'm feeling all types of stuff. Nobody cares about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worthy. All of the stuff that the enemy is speaking over me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have a dad. Just all of these different things. Whatever it is, you're dealing with this health condition. This man doesn't love you. Whatever it was that the enemy was speaking over me, it
Mm-hmm.
was so heavy at that time. And I ended up like getting away from that situation when my niece called me. And so the next day, I remember just being so depressed. Just so depressed. Actually, in that season of my life, every day that I woke up, I was actually angry that I woke up, because I
Mm-hmm.
was dealing with so much depression. I just did not want to live. So I was having suicidal thoughts even before that moment, but I hadn't really acted on anything, because I
Mm-hmm.
remember just when I woke up, I just would be mad that the sun was shining. And
Right.
so I remember the day after my suicide attempt, or not attempt, but encounter, I call it.
Yeah, I agree. It was
Yeah, it
definitely
wasn't an attempt.
an
Yeah.
encounter.
Yeah, encounter. So when I woke up the next day, this was the first day in months that I wasn't angry that I woke up. It's almost like I had this sense of hope. So I remember just falling on my knees and just weeping. And at the time of me weeping, God just was speaking all of these things over me about just, you have a purpose. I love you. Just all of these different things. And so
Hallelujah.
at that moment, I started to hear God for the first time, or in that way.
Right.
And so, of course, everything with the relationship started shifting, because through that relationship, I started to get closer to God. I remember one time me and him got saved together because, I was starting to go to church and things like that. Um, but I still was building a relationship, and I wasn't to the place of fully submitting my life to God.
Hmm.
And so that was that moment. What really just broke everything was when my grandmother passed away 3 years later in 2016. So the only thing that I wanted from my grandmother was her Bible. I just heavily felt led to get her Bible. And so I was in another season of depression. At this point, the relationship that I was in had ended. We had been together close to 4 years. So that had ended. My parents had, or my mom and my stepdad, which is, I consider him my dad, they had gotten a divorce.
Mm.
I was dealing with so much deep depression from my grandmother passing, and I was just in such a dark season. I wasn't eating. I literally remember being in the bed, and every single day I just would be on social media to the wee hours of the morning until I went to sleep. And I had got so thin, had lost so much weight. Um, it just was a really, really dark time because it was so much grief and loss going on. And so I had another encounter with God where I had been feeling like led to go in like my closet, because I had made like this little prayer space in my
Hmm.
closet, but I never went to pray. I just had made it.
Oh.
And so so I had, like, once I got to the point where, okay, now I'm just gonna start trying to pick myself back together, I started to just do other things, go out. Eventually I started having sex and things like that. And so I went out one night with this girl that I didn't even know, and I ended up being roofied. And so that night, yeah,
My
I
goodness.
know, crazy. So that night, I ended up having what the world calls it, a paralysis dream, I think is what it's called. But of course, this is spiritual. So I know that it was like some type of demonic attack. But I had that, and the next day, it's just like almost like God was speaking from within me. I'm like, nothing is working. In the past I tried to kill myself, that didn't work. Me having sex is not taking away the pain. Me
Right.
drinking is not taking away the pain. Nothing is taking away the pain. And
Right.
so it was almost like the life of my grandmother was highlighted. She lived a
Hmm.
life where she just constantly seek God all day, every day. She was walking through the house singing hymns. And so everything about her was leaning on God and trusting God, and that was just highlighted to me. And I
Right.
finally went into the closet and picked up her Bible, and I just had my first supernatural encounter with God, and it's just kind
Hmm.
of been been building
Yeah.
that relationship since
Yeah.
then.
But even listening to you tell me of your journey to getting to where you ultimately are now, it's just amazing to me how we go through these things, we make these conscious decisions to do certain things, but God is still pulling at us, and He's still calling us, and He's still reminding us that He loves us, that He wants us, that He wants to fellowship with us, and He wants this really intimate relationship with us. And I know sometimes it's like hindsight is 2020, right? So when you write in your book, and it's so amazing that you how we can look back and say, I see plainly now that what I was dealing with and the reason why I was acting this way is because I was dealing with XYZ. And again, in your book, one of your themes that you talk about, one of the topics that you touch on is abandonment. And I know that you really felt that from your father who decided not to be in your life. But and I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that, about your relationship with him and how it led to some of the decisions that you made. But I wanted to say that one of the things that I loved about when you talked about abandonment is you gave the definition of abandonment. But when you talk about abandonment as a demonic spirit that we're wrestling with, one of the things you said is that abandonment, the demonic spirit, reinforces those lives of isolation and fear and rejection, right? It drives people to seek a counterfeit comfort. So all those relationships that we know we shouldn't be in because we're dealing with the spirit of abandonment, we're looking for a counterfeit, right? We start looking for those unhealthy relationships. You start dealing with addiction, and one of the things that I never thought about, and I saw this in myself, self-sabotage. I am the queen of self-sabotage, and when I do it, DeLisa, it's nothing grand. It's just me talking myself out of something that I know that God has prepared for me. But because I've decided that I'm not worthy enough or I don't know how to do it, then I will just very quietly talk myself, out of doing it. And I said, my God, I did not even relate that to the spirit of abandonment because myself, my childhood was the product of divorce. My father was around when he could be, but not as much as I would have liked. So there were some senses of that I didn't even realize until I read your book of not feeling good enough for him to be around more. And as a child, I was a very, very, very angry child. And my grandmother, who was very instrumental in my life, like your grandmother was, she was such a rock for me. She would say to me, she said, baby, you're mad at your daddy. Like no one else told me that why I was mad. She just plainly told me that you're mad at your daddy. And she kind of helped me see my parents, and you touched on that too. The letter that you wrote to your mother, you touched on like how, and when you talk about your father, about our parents are humans living for the first time on this planet just like we are, and they have their own experiences that we're dealing with. And as children we don't see it, but for my grandmother to tell me, she said, you're mad at your daddy. She said, but I want you to realize that's the only daddy you'll ever have.
Mm.
So she helped me to come to a place to accept and to love my father where he is. And she did that for me like at the age of 11 or 12. So it made a big difference and made a big difference in my life in some aspects, but in some aspects those parts of abandonment weren't healed. And it wasn't until I read your book I was like, it's the self-sabotage because you don't think it'll last. So you're talking yourself out of it.
Yes, yes, that's so good. Being afraid of good things because you think that it's almost like when is the other shoe gonna drop?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
Yes. So growing up, so were your parents, I know your mother had you young, was she 19?
19, yeah.
19. And her and your father in a relationship? What was their dynamic?
Yeah, so I actually just found a lot of this stuff out right before my father passed because my mom, the things that she told me and what my dad told me were not the same. So I'm like, where is this coming from?
Girl, that's always the case. That's
Yeah, and
always the case.
so for what my mom always told me, my dad is from Texas. He's actually from Dallas. They had moved right across the street from my mom at the time in my grandmother's house, right across the street. And they started to like each other. Eventually started to sleep together and this and that. And so what my mom says is that she never really liked my dad like that. Almost like he was the one on her pretty much. And so she said that I was actually conceived during a breakup. She said that she went over there, like they had just broken up, and then they end up being intimate, and then she got pregnant. And so, actually, she had me when she was 20. She got pregnant when she was 19. But what my dad told me was that my mom wanted a real family with him, and he actually ended up choosing another woman over my mom. And so I had an older brother. I had a brother who was a few months older than me, and so his mom and my mom were pregnant at the same time. And so it was just a lot of back and forth. And, my dad admitted, he was like, I was just so broken. And, that was just their way back then. They weren't being taught the right things. They weren't seeing the right things. Even going back to our grandfathers, there was a lot of like infidelity. Even though our grandmothers stayed married to them a long time, they went through a lot in those marriages. And
Right.
so that's what my dad saw. And so I remember him telling me, he was like, I actually always wanted to be the opposite of my father. I wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to be faithful, but he just fell short. And so from what he said, he was basically lying to my mom, constantly telling her, he was gonna be there, we were gonna be a family, but then he had chosen the other lady. And so he actually was very present, or at least a lot more present with my brothers than he ever was with me.
Wow.
And so that was their dynamic from what I learned a couple of years ago.
Right. And when you had the chance to reconcile with your father, when you and him spoke, did you lay out for him what it did to you growing up, him not being
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, I did. So my dad, when I first released my book, because I had fully released it, even though there's so much different in this book, it's so much different, so much that has been taken out, rewritten, added in. But he read the book in 2021. And
Okay.
so a lot of what he read, I was already talking to him about. And so when we started to restore our relationship, he actually was in jail again.
Okay.
And when he got out, he was only out like 8 months before he was killed. But
Mm.
our whole relationship, like the rebuilding of our relationship, was done while he was in prison. And so I was very honest with him about like how I felt, as a child, what they did to me. And then he got to read a lot of it in my book. And to be honest with you, my dad was very accountable. He talked to me about some of the things that he was going through at the time that I was growing up. And
Hmm.
so I found out that my dad was on drugs. I had never known it.
Right.
He was on drugs. He battled with mental health and depression. So many things that I found out that I did not know. And it's almost like it gave language to who he was as a man and his struggles. And it
Right.
actually helped me in my forgiving process with him,
Hmm.
because it's like he was just a young man. And if you just want to go cultural with it, they were putting a lot of this stuff in our communities, such as
Hmm.
drugs, to intentionally get the fathers out of the homes. And that's a
Right.
whole nother thing.
Right.
So yeah, I was very open and honest with him about like, how I felt, how I felt that his absence caused me to choose, certain relationships and these deep wounds that I dealt with. I was able to have those hard conversations with him.
Right. And even though going through the abandonment and you, like you said, you experienced some trauma and some deep wounds, when you hear his story and what he was dealing with, the things that had attached themselves to him, did you kind of feel God's protection as to why he wasn't
Ooh,
there?
girl. Nah, you ain't gonna have me crying now. So listen, this is actually why I say that healing is a journey,
Yeah.
because that was actually brought to light within the last 2 months.
Hmm.
So it's so crazy that you just said that.
Yeah.
So I still was dealing with some residue, even with the rewrite of this book, of like, I forgive my dad, but I still just don't understand like why he was more present with my brothers than he was with me. Because even when he was going through stuff, he was still there with them. Like I'm looking at graduation pictures,
Right.
all of this stuff that I never got. And I'm like, Lord, what is it? And so I was painting one day about a month and a half ago. And a lot of times when I'm painting, I actually end up going through healing and deliverance. That's just the way that God processes me.
Right.
And so I ended up breaking down and crying, and this is all healing, right? And God revealed to me that my dad being kept away was actually out of protection.
Yeah.
And God told me that if he was as present as you had liked him to be, it actually would have caused more harm than the harm that you feel like you've experienced so far. And so I was like, wow. So I had to really cry through that, process that, so yeah, like I say, that's why I say that
Yeah.
healing is a journey.
Yeah. And just listening to that, and what I'm going to tell you what I'm sensing in my spirit with, because when you were talking about that, I said, okay, God, I see you were protecting her. But what I find is interesting is your father was an addict. You still dealt with addiction in a different sense. But because you weren't um because your father wasn't there to be a model for you, so you could really learn how to model addiction, so you could be perfect at being an addict, right? You kind of dealt with the residue of his spiritual battle. But what I sense is through you, God is breaking that,
Mm-hmm.
because because you have gone through this in this deliverance, and you wrote this book, you reconciled with your father, you were able to break these things from your life. So now it's like the next generation will
Mm.
have a better footing, will have a better weapons. They will be able to resist this stronghold, because of what you were able to do to break this curse of addiction that was
Yeah.
coming through your father's bloodline.
Yeah, thank you. I received that. That's actually that's my goal. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want, my kids, my grandkids moving forward in my family's bloodline. And I do not want any of them to deal with the things that I've had to deal with.
Right.
So yeah, thank you
Right.
for that.
Yes, because I was just, when you were talking, I was like, we don't even realize what he is protecting us from. But the
Hmm.
fact that you still dealt with addiction, but it could have been so much worse. It could have been so much worse. Lord, I just thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lord. Because that's what he wanted. Like that's what the enemy wanted looking back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like the military is just the environment is just set up for you to just drink heavy and
Hmm.
party, especially when we're overseas and stuff.
Right.
And so I had become really dependent on alcohol. Don't think that I was an alcoholic,
Hmm.
but there were moments, as I was getting to know God, where He brought to my attention, you can't even go a day without wine. And I was like, wow. So that was another thing that I had to like lay down and, not use as a supplement to,
Right.
hide any pain or whatnot. But I definitely believe that that was the enemy's agenda. Like he really wanted me to go so deep.
Right.
Now I can tell you, I truly believe that I was addicted to sex. And that
Hmm.
links in with the pornography addiction. Like that's
Right.
all dealing with like lust and perversion,
Right.
for sure.
Right. And I know, and I don't remember, um when were you first exposed to pornography? I know you were exposed very young.
Yeah, I think I was about 8.
Okay. And
Yeah.
was it magazines or videotapes? What did you find?
It was through videotapes. Back then
Okay.
we had the VHS tapes. And so, all of the adults, they had those kind of tapes, they would try to hide them or whatnot. But, we eventually, got into them, and Yeah, that's how I ended up getting
Mhm.
addicted. It was a very young age. That's why I say, when I first released this book, I put it out and I did some stuff at the church that I was a part of. And I think this little girl was about 12.
Mm.
And she ended up getting a copy of my book. This other girl had got it for her. And it actually caused some division with me and the church. Her dad was really mad that, he felt like his 12-year-old shouldn't be reading about somebody saying that they're struggling with porn addiction and all of this.
Mm.
But it's so crazy where now I actually recommend that kids read the book. I would say 12 or older, I would say that. And I say that because if I was dealing with porn addiction at 8 years old, if I'm not too young to deal with it, why is a child too young to read about it so that they can get breakthrough?
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. So we dealt with it in my family um, because one of my family members saw, I'm older, but anyways, you know how it used to be TV, the TV Guide channel. You could turn the
Yeah,
channel
yeah.
and there'd be,
And they had the stuff. Hmm.
yes. So even though it was nothing that you could get through on our TV, one of my family members saw some titles. They have very interesting titles,
Yep.
and they wanted to know what that title meant, which caused them to do a search on the computer, and that's how they were
Hmm.
introduced to it, right? So and like you're saying, very young, like 9, 10. So if your child is old enough to be dealing with it, then yes, they're definitely old enough to have a discussion about it. But we, as sometimes as family, we're so taboo, or we think that we can punish something out of a child.
Oh my God. Listen, that's a whole nother sermon because I actually dealt with that with my own niece.
Hmm.
And it's something that I've had to pray through, continuously pray through, because I know that her mother is not there spiritually. And so the fact that I know, what's really going on in the spiritual realm, I tried to get her to see it's not the child's fault. This is not something that you can discipline or whoop out of her.
Right.
Um, for one, it's in your bloodline and it's spiritual. But like I said, of course she didn't understand that, which I get because before I was saved, I didn't get things of God or the spiritual realm. So it's so funny that you say that because it's so so true. It's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know when you were dealing with it, I thought that the language that you used was so interesting because I've never, we have addiction in my family. We have drug addiction, alcohol addiction. And because I know addiction is rampant in my family, there's just some things that I just will not do, will not
Mhm.
try because I already know. And I'm just like,
Right.
I ain't got time to be, I'd be like the best wino in the world because I try
Right.
to do things to perfection, right? So it's like I don't even have time. So when you were saying that there were certain instances in your life, like during low points, when you would turn to porn because that was a safe space for you,
Yeah.
right? But then afterwards, you feel so dirty. There's
Yes.
such a duality. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I thought that was so interesting.
Yes. And it's so common too. Anybody who has struggled with porn addiction and just porn itself, that's how it makes you feel. It gets everything stirring while you're watching it. You do what you do, and then afterwards you just feel disgusted. The reason why is because this is all spiritual. So basically
Mhm.
what's going on in the spiritual realm, the enemy is pulling you in, he's luring you in. He's using your loneliness. He's using your
Mhm.
brokenness. He's using your unhealed wounds and sometimes even your pride to pull you in.
Oh,
And then it's
wow.
almost like you manipulate somebody and you discard them. So I
Mm,
believe that because the enemy is doing that in the spiritual realm, that's
right.
one of the reasons why you feel so bad and disgusted with yourself afterwards. And then if you have God in you in any type of way, you're also feeling conviction and you're
Right.
feeling a little guilt. There's a such thing as godly guilt. It's not to
Hmm.
condemn you, but it's to alert you that you've done something wrong.
Right.
And so
Conviction.
you feel that.
Right.
And so that's what I believe is going on. Now, as far as, it's so funny how the enemy doesn't use new tricks. So when I latched on to porn around 8, there was a lot going on in my family. My mother, I was having to overhear my mother go through abuse. I was still dealing with the fact that my father wasn't there, and I just always desired to have like a healthy family home. I didn't want to be in chaos, but that was my story.
Right.
And so because of that, porn was an escape. And so, because those wounds were not healed, it still was the escape even as I got older. And
Right.
so, I would do good, and then I would be dealing with, for me particularly, it was loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
That was the main thing that pulled me back. And a lot of times it would be because I would have this moment where I was believing a lie. Like for me, I'm believing God for marriage and children. And I'm
Right.
in my mid 30s right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would have these moments where I would just have these thoughts like, it's not going to happen for me. I might as well watch porn and masturbate because I'm never going to be intimate with a man again. So I
Right.
might as well supplement with this because it's not going to happen. And so
Right.
those were the things that would pull me back in. But when God gave me the revelation that he gave me that I put in his book, I was just mind blown. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I mean, it is. There's so many things that you touched on. When I was reading, I was like, my God, this is a good book.
Thank
I
you.
I really enjoyed it, and I told you it was such a blessing to me. You just touched on so many good things. But one of the things that you just said that I love so much, I don't even know if you realize how profound it is, how the enemy will manipulate you and then discard you.
Hmm.
That is so profound and it is so true. How he will just, will trick us into thinking that whatever we're doing that's not of God, that it's all right, that it's okay, is what I have to do to get through. And you just feel so gung-ho about it. But when he is done, he will leave you with nothing.
High
He
and dry.
will, yes, high and dry, high and dry, absolutely. So um when did you realize that that the porn was an addiction?
Um, Maybe about 4 years ago.
Okay.
I think around the time when I was doing the book the first time is when I realized it. Because at that time I had my podcast going, and I was trying to step out, but again, it just wasn't the season for me to step out. And
Right.
so I was still falling. I was writing about the porn addiction, but I was still falling into the porn.
Mm,
And so, um, as I was just walking, everything out with God, he highlighted it's a stronghold, it's an addiction.
yeah.
And here's the thing, I was trying to heal the addiction without dealing with the root, and you can't do
Ooh, that's right.
You can't do
So
that.
what
You
is
have
the
to deal
root?
with what's pulling you towards what you're leaning on.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic and you just try to stop drinking and cold turkey, whatever, that's why
Mm-hmm.
so many people relapse. People will be doing good for years and then they'll relapse. The reason why is because you never dealt with the wounds that is taking you into it in the first place. And
Right.
so that's really what that process was dealing with what is it in me that is
Mm-hmm.
constantly leaning towards this because I'm not healed.
Right. But when people think about, sexual sin, the only thing they think about is lust. So what was the root for you? Because we know lust, yes, but we never really sit down to assess what is
Mhm.
everything that's connected that's
Mhm.
bringing me to this thing.
To
So
it.
what was it for you?
I can tell you that one of the things was that it ran in my family bloodline.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a lot of prayers of dismantling that you have to do. I couldn't figure out why was it so strong. Why was it so heavy? And then I also had to start paying attention to what actually led me up to watching porn. Because it was always a pattern with me. It would start out with me listening to inappropriate books or watching something that I shouldn't be watching. And then my body is naturally reacting. And then I start having all these different thoughts that the enemy is planning. And then I end up falling back into porn. So it was always this like step by step thing. But understanding that there are people in my family that dealt with this, aunts that dealt with pornography addiction, leaned on it, probably even in their marriage, where they weren't being satisfied and they turned to porn. Right. So it was understanding that was in my family bloodline. It was also understanding that I could take my perversion, I can take my lust, I can take whatever is dealing with sexual things, I can take that to God. For the longest time, I was embarrassed because I was thinking, you can't take sexual things to God, that's not right. That's my dad. I don't want him to know or to hear about these things. But the crazy thing about it is God already knows.
Right.
He already knows.
Right.
And not only does he know, he has the answer. He has the remedy to pull you out. And so really going back to him and allowing him to do the revealing, because I had so much confusion. I'm always wanting to like seek answers. I'm always trying to figure out something. I'm the person that I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And so it's almost like God used that curiosity to really help me understand everything that was linked to my addiction. Right. And then also you have to think about when, I'm not a virgin. And so I have had a life of sexual encounters. And in the spiritual realm, if you have not broken those soul ties, you're also sexually in the spiritual realm attached to your past partners. Right. So it was even that having to come out of agreement with a lot of the things that I had done sexually as well.
Right. And I thought that was profound too, when you said we don't even realize that when you're watching porn and you're masturbating, you are in a union with those people, and what they're doing. You're tying yourself to those that perversion. So I mean, just so awe-inspiring, just so many gems. So many gems. I loved it. Let me see. There was, oh man, I don't even know how I'm going to flow into this, but I just I just love this, and I wrote it down. You wrote what when you were talking about being in relationships and being in unhealthy relationships, um by fixing or rescuing someone else, you somehow fix yourself or prove your worth. And I thought about so many times, not just romantic relationships, but even like friendships that I held on to that were of no benefit to me. People who may have had like this opinion of me, and I'm trying so hard to change their opinion of me. And then I finally got to the point of like, why? Like, God sees me, God loves me, he knows the person that I am. And so many times like we will reject people who genuinely want to be with us or have a relationship with us, whether it's romantic or platonic, to chase after someone who we're trying to prove ourselves to. Because it's like, if I can get them to see the good in me, if I can get them to see, then I'm worthy.
Absolutely. And you know what that is? It's not even about the person. You're trying what you're trying to get from them is what you wanted to get from the first person who didn't see you. The first person who rejected
DeLisa, the first person that rejected you.
That did it. And so you're using these people because however your life panned out, you never got that from the first person. And a lot of times that's our parents. I know for me, I always wanted, I never wanted a man to leave. That was a big trigger for me. Even if they were the wrong man, it's like, don't leave me. But that was rooted in, I didn't want my father to leave.
Right.
And so I'm trying to make them redeem something that I couldn't get out of my father.
Right. Right. So as you all can see, Childhood Scars is definitely a must read. And it's definitely, if you're looking to go on that healing journey, then I would really, really just like press and behoove you to get this book as soon as she releases it. And so tell us, when is it going to be available?
So it is going to be available next month. Right now the date that I have is April 24th, but I am
Mhm.
trying my best to get it out before then. And also, I have Childhood Scars book, but then I also have a journal that you can pair with it called the Reveal to Heal Journal. And
Mhm.
so, in each of the chapters in this book, it's 10 chapters. Each chapter has a journal prompt. If you were to get the journal that I made to go with the book, you can kind of like read the book and you can write, you can go through the journal prompts and you can have a whole other process. So I'm releasing it as a bundle deal. And so
Mhm.
I want people to be, because I'm a writer and writing has been such an instrument in my healing. Oh my God, can I say how much journaling has helped me heal? And so I really want people to be able to read the chapters, come across the journal prompts, and then open their Reveal to Heal journal, and then be able to write everything out and go through their healing process with God.
Right. And I'll tell you what I liked about your chapters and your prompts is that, again, you are so intimate with us and so revealing. So reading about the things that occurred in your life, and you looking back and really giving definition to what you were dealing with. And then when you get to the journal prompt, when I got to the journal prompt, it wasn't just like you asking me a question and then like I'm answering it, and I think that I know what I'm talking about. Reading your story and then coming to the journal prompt made me stop and say, okay, wait a minute. Is there something in your life that you haven't been looking at the right way? Like, take a minute and let's just be really introspective right now. Let's really think about the question that she's asking you. Like I said, just something as simple as me not understanding that my self sabotage was me still dealing with abandonment issues. I mean, I'll be 45 this year, and I thought that a lot of the things that I'm healing from when it comes to my childhood, I pretty much thought I had those things, checked
Out the
off.
box, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So it gave me an opportunity to be very, very um just like real with myself, because I'm like, girl, ain't nobody here. So
Right.
you might as well tell the truth. But again, reading it from your perspective helped me to say, is there a different way that you can look at this? Maybe
Yeah,
this isn't what you think that it is. So
yeah.
that's what I really, really loved about it. So yeah, I'm excited for your release, and I'm so glad that it's going to be available to my listening audience. I will, of course, promote it as much as I possibly can, because I think that it is a must read. I think it is a must read.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much. I'm just
welcome.
sitting here thinking about the journey. I'm like, wow, God really does redeem all things. Like
Yes.
He really does.
Yes, yes, he really does. So I'm not going to hold you any much longer. I thank you so much for joining us on Speak Your Life podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. I know you all love her as much as I do. I can't wait to hear your thoughts when you actually get the book and you start doing your journal entries. Again, she is on a mission to help us heal from the inside out, and I'm so glad I get to go on this journey with her. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.